topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Connected Table Live. We're your hosts, Melanie Young and David Ransom, your insatiably curious culinary couple. We travel the world to bring you the amazing people behind the wine, spirits, food, and hotels and places we visit, to share their stories, to get you excited about traveling and visiting and trying and exploring and eating and drinking and exploring with us. And we are taking you somewhere today that we had the great honor of visiting in December 2025. Honestly, everybody's got Portugal on the tips of their tongues. They're all saying, we want to go to Portugal. We want to go. And then the next question is, should we go to Lisbon or Porto? Well, you go both.
If you have the time, do both.
If you have the time, both. Portugal's amazing. It's not an either or question.
And there's more beyond those two cities as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But just to set you up for today's show, because we did a great show on Lisbon earlier, where are we? We are actually overlooking the city of Porto, also called Oporto, from Vila Nova de Gaia, which is a very important location across the river from Porto, because it's where many of the historic port lodges are located. If you must know something about Portugal, you must know that it is exclusively the place where all port, a very fine fortified wine, is made. And a lot of people don't realize that there's Porto and then there's the Douro River Valley, and there's a good 2-hour drive in between. But the Douro River Valley is one of the oldest demarcated regions in the world, a designated region that's home to not only the PDO, or the protected designation of origin for Porto, but also some very fine Douro wines. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is important to visit. And the city of Porto is just a treasure. And take your time. So we're going to take some time today to talk to one of the esteemed producers that we met and got to know twice. We had lunch with her in New York in 2024, and then we actually got to visit with her and her team in Vila Nova de Gaia at their gorgeous lodge and hotel. We're talking about Carla Tiago, who is the longtime winemaker for Kopke, Portugal's oldest port house. We're going to let her tell the story and learn more about what Kopke specializes in, and understanding the many incredible ranges of port that you can enjoy and how to enjoy them, and of course, how to visit Kopke. So Carla Tiago, welcome to the Connected Table.
Thank you. Hi, how are you?
We're great.
We're doing very well. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today, Carla.
Oh, it's great to be here. It's great to see you again.
Yes.
Well, we have 2 bottles in front of us. This is a perfect time of year to be drinking port, I must say.
Yeah.
It really is. And everybody's curious.
Every day is a perfect time to have a port. But yes,
That
especially in the winter, it goes very, very well.
Yeah. Let's start with about you, because we'd love to tell the story of our people. You were actually born in the heart of the Douro Superiore. Tell us about your background.
Well, so I was born in the very, very small town. His name is Pretos Castelhanos, so it's in the Superior Douro. But when I was 5, I moved to Porto. So my parents went to Porto to work. And so I grew up in Porto. But every holidays, weekends, we were coming back because we had family. Well, my grandfather also has a small vineyard and olive trees and almond trees, and so my father was always coming back to help him. And after when he died, my parents preserved all these things. So I grew up in a big city like Porto. And at the same time, I had the experience to to also to live in a rural place. So and I think that helped me a lot during my growth. So wine was something that I never thought about it, like perhaps grapes and almonds and olive trees, and all these things. But that's something that happened in the way. So it was like it was not planned. So I went to college to study biochemistry. At that time, I was not really. I didn't knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I did an internship in a port wine house in Callum, in the lab, and then I asked if I could work during the harvest. They accept me, so I did my first harvest, and during that period, I discovered that perhaps this could be a thing that I would do. And since that time, I've been working with wine. So it was like a discover.
Serendipity for you.
It was right where you wanted to be, and you didn't even know it.
It's true. I think most of the good things in my life happened like that. I didn't plan. At some point, I was exposed to them, and when I like something, I normally go for it, and happened to. So it was amazing, and it changed my life a lot, a lot.
So, how did you come to Kopke? And then this is a great way to segue into how you came to Kopke, and also to talk about the history of Kopke and its current ownership.
Yeah. So, well, Kopke is the oldest port wine house. It was established in 1638 by a German family. They came to Portugal because it was like a businessman and a diplomat. So he was like a general consul of the Hanseatic cities in Lisbon, and then he moved to Porto. And at that point, Nicolau Kopke and his son, Cristiano Kopke, they start in the trade business. They start to export port wine to Hamburg, where they came from. And well, most of the port wine companies at that time, they were not Portuguese. They were English, German, Danish, plenty of from different countries. And basically what they were doing is they were like buying the wines in the Douro Valley. They were bringing them to Vila Nova de Gaia, aging them, and shipping them from here, from Vila Nova de Gaia to the world. So most of them, they didn't have like vineyards. They were not producers of wine. They were like they purchased the wines, aged them, and they were selling them. So Kopke started like that too. And in 1781, they bought the first estate. It was Quinta de Roriz, that they sell when they sold the company in the end of the 19th century. So since 1638 until the end of the 19th century, the company stayed in the Kopke family. At that time, they sold it to a Mr. Bohan, that was an Englishman, and he kept the company until the end of the Second War. So in 1952, he sold the company to a Portuguese port wine company, Barros. Barros was like a young company because it started in 1913, but at that point they were quite solid. So they were buying like small companies that, especially after the Second War, that were in trouble, and Kopke was one of them. And they keep it quite separately. So all the wines of Kopke were Kopke wines. The wines that they produce every harvest were different wines that had the Kopke mark, okay? So, and profile. So in 2006, Soja Vinos at that time was the owner of Carla, another port wine brand, bought Barros and Kopke. And since that time has been in this company. Right now, Soja Vinhos has a new name, so it was rebranding last year. So right now, everything is called Kopke Group. Because Kopke is the oldest port wine house, so it has like so all the brands are don't belong to Soja Vinhos anymore. They belong to Kopke. Okay.
I think that's a good rebrand. I have a question for you. So one of the things that enlightened us when we were traveling, and we visited 6 producers, and they all were like the oldest, everybody's very old.
Oldest family,
oldest family, oldest
oldest
courthouse. So we learned 3 things. One, a lot of them were and they all seem to be from the 1600s or 1700s. Okay, so this will lead to my next question. But the other observation is many intermarried. The families intermarried. A lot of them, as you well pointed out, were not Portuguese. The Van Zellers were from Holland. The British were merchants that came over. Taylor Fladgate. They all came from elsewhere. And who was making the port? So before that, before all these crafty, wise businessmen and families came over to become merchants and settle and then have port houses, who was making the wine? What was the origin of port itself, and why here in the Douro Valley?
Okay, so this is a long story, and some parts of it are quite a mystery. Okay, but everything started Douro. We are producing wine in Douro since the beginning of the time. Okay, so when Romans came to Portugal, they brought all these ways of making wine. So we are producing wine since that time. But when England and France start a war, where England decided not to buy any French wines, they had to look for wine in other places. So they came to Portugal. Mm-hmm. And Portugal and England, they have one of the oldest trade alliance. So when they came to Portugal, they start to look for wine, and they start in the Minho, in Vinho Verde. But they didn't like it. So they decided to come down, and they went to Douro Valley. So at that time, the harvest was made in Douro Valley by the owners of the grapes. Okay, so the wine was produced during the harvest, and after the harvest, I'm not sure, but perhaps in the spring, the buyers from the different houses went to Douro Valley, taste wines, and decide which ones they would buy. At that time, the Douro wine was still wine. It was not port, right, what we know as port right now. Okay, so it was a still wine, and to make sure that wine didn't have any kind of trouble during the trip to England, they were putting 15% of spirit. So basically, they were increasing the alcohol level to make sure that the wines didn't get damaged during the trip. Okay. Well, where and how they start to become sweeter and with higher alcohol level, we don't really know. Well, what we know is that on all the letters that I knew is of course, the people that were buying the wines in the other countries, they were telling what kind of wines they wanted. So normally they prefer the sweeter, right, and high alcohol level, And one of the things that it's and perhaps it's what happened. It was one year that was 1820. It was a very, very hot year. So the grapes had a huge sugar level. And when they start to fermentate it, they didn't ferment it until the end because with 40% of the alcohol, the yeast die. And so the wine became sweet. They became with a high level of sugar, residual sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they, even though they put like 15% of alcohol, perhaps, so basically they had like a wine with 80% of alcohol with a good quantity of sugar, and it was like everybody loved the wine. So at that point, what decided port wine start to be as it is right now, because people wanted or like it like that. We don't really, we know that after that time, most of the wines had like a good quantity of sugar and alcohol. So we really believe that like 1820, at that time, things start to change. And in nowadays, well, this is perhaps one of the wines that is more regulated. You know, we have rules for everything, since the plantation to the picking to the winemaking to the aging to the bottling. You know, everything is controlled by the Institute of Port Wine. They know the quantity of wines that we have in our cellars of all the port wine houses. Okay, so they control everything. Everything is very well controlled, even the spirit that we have to buy every year for to do these wines, to make these wines. Okay, so everything is like and port wine always has been like this. It perhaps is one, I think, the one that is more regulated, is more controlled in all world.
Well, it's interesting. So what happened as a practical measure to protect the wine, much like with sherry, right?
Yes.
The same thing, the merchants, to protect the wine, it gets over to the countries. And historically, England, Germany, the northern countries, they do like sweeter wines. That's how dosage was created. They wanted to sell more wine and champagne. And I think it was Madame Pommery started adding dosage and to sell the wine. So that was a history, but serendipitously, once again, there was a demand, an opportunity, and that's how we came to port today. The they that you're referring to in terms of regulation is the Instituto de Vinos de Douro in Porto, the IVDP, which is a government organization that has strict guidelines on production of port, which we can talk about. And for anyone who is listening or viewing the show, you can actually visit the IVDP offices. They're in a very historic, I think it's a historic bank building.
It's an old bank building right in downtown Porto.
Yeah, the tour is actually very, very interesting.
It is actually quite
and I encourage everybody, right?
It's definitely a laboratory.
Yeah, it's a lab. We get to see the laboratory. Not everybody can go into the laboratory.
Let's put it this way: people are walking around in white coats. So,
white
coats,
it's
a lab.
And all sorts of
a lot of beakers.
There's a lot of regulation.
But it's very interesting because they really, as you said, Carla, they implement restrictions and regulations on just about every part of the port production, except the growing of the grapes. But they may even do that too. I'm not really sure. However, it's right down to the type of spirit, and you have to, if you're the spirit that you add in, you have to have that certified by the port people so that you can then add that spirit in. You can't do it beforehand. So it's it's very regulated. And interestingly enough, a lot of that port houses, and I'm sure yours included, have a particular spirit that they like to use, that they go and have made for them, whether it's in Portugal or in Spain or in France. Some of them go to, and they all have their own particular type of spirit that they like to use in their production,
which creates the style. So just to recap, we're in Porto. The Douro Valley is only location where port is made. And it was people, it's historical for that reason. It is highly regulated by a government organization, and it's a very complex product to make with many styles, and every step of the way is regulated. And as a result of that, each port house, Quinta, the name of where the port is made, so we'll talk about that and the relationship, has a distinct style. So let's now take it to Kopke. And what is the Kopke style, and how is that distinguished in the family of port?
Well, so in port wine we have many different styles, as you said. Right. So this is a fortified wine. That means that at some point during the fermentation we are going to put the spirit we are going to stop the fermentation by killing the yeasts. And the point that we stop the fermentation is going to be different if you want like a sweet wine or a dry one. Okay, so if you want a dry one, you are going to let your fermentation go on, and then you are going to put the spirit, and you have your pots done. Okay, after this, so this happened during the harvest, okay? And at that time, you already have to know what kind of wines you want to do, okay? Of course, if you want like wines that are going to age for a long time, you are going to make sure that you are going to work to extract everything during that period of fermentation. And we are talking about like a few days, like between 3 and 5 days. So you have to work like, you have to be very, very precise. You have to extract everything, but at the same time, you want to extract it in a soft way. You want to extract what you want, okay? And this must be very well, it's a very precise work. After this, the wines are going to stay during the winter in the Douro Valley. And then in the spring, we start to move them, okay? Like February, normally it's before the spring, like February, March, we start to move the wines from Douro Valley to Vila Nova de Gaia, okay?
So let me let's note that here, because that's was over time a very historic movement. So if we move our shoulders, there were these famous boats. They don't do the boats anymore, but they're still hanging out there. What were the name of the boats?
So it's barcos rebeldos.
Yeah.
So rebelo.
Yeah.
Rebelo boats.
Yeah. And now it's by tanker. I mean, how do they move now? Ship or?
Well, no, by tank, by truck.
Okay, by truck. So they're no longer
refrigerated, okay. Like with other kind of conditions. At that time, in the old times, they were coming in the barrels, in that ships. And normally, not normally, but sometimes you could lose everything during one of the streets, because the river at that time was quite wild.
Right, the Douro River. So and the reason for moving is important. The reason they're moved from the Douro Valley and mainly Chimacorca, which is one of the three, the main production area, to Vila Nova, where you are now, is because of temperature management, correct?
Well, the truth is that in the beginning, they were bringing the wines because here it's near the sea and it's near the port.
Okay.
And where you could ship the wines. The truth is that that's the main reason why most of the lodges are in Vila Nova de Gaia. And but the truth, but it's also that I'm not sure if it's casual or not. But the here we are facing north, so most of these places don't receive sun or a lot of sun, even during the summer. And being next to the sea, we have like a high humidity, and the truth is that this is the best conditions that you could ask to age wine. So you have humidity, you have like your temperatures are quite controlled, because here you don't have like a big range of temperature between day and night. So it's the perfect place to age your wines. You lose less wine during the aging process, and at the same time you have a better balance. Like for Kopke, we move our wines to Vila Nova de Gaia. Well, we still keep like a very few quantity in Douro Valley, but some states and some brands that only have the states in Douro, and they make their wines in Douro and age their wines in Douro. They have a different style, because it's like it's more like for a melas flavors. Here you have like more a balanced kind of flavors and acidity. So for Kopke here, it's a natural place to age our wines. We are known especially for our old townies and old wines. So the townie style is the style that is more recognized in Kopke, but we also produce very good ruby style. Of course, most of the companies, it's easier to produce a ruby because you can produce it and sell it in in quite fast. Okay, you can bottle it like in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. If you are producing tawny styles, especially colheitas, well, you will have to keep them for a long, long time in your cellars, in barrels. And that requires like space and time and knowledge. And yeah, so it's
and you really need to monitor it along the way a lot so that you know that it's aging the correct way as well.
Yes. So it's a different kind of work. So basically, the different styles require different kinds of aging, and that's what's going to be the big difference between them. Okay, so of course, during the harvest and the winemaking, we are going to have some requirements for the different styles. But what's going to distinguish the different wines is going to be the way that we are going to age them. So if you want to age if you want to produce like a ruby style, a ruby, an LBV, a vintage, you are going to make sure that these wines are going to be preserved like in big wood vats, or even in concrete vats or inox tanks, something that it's not going to or a place where you can preserve them from oxygen. If you want to produce a tawny style, well, then you have to move them to barrels, to smaller wood vats, to make sure that they are going to be in contact with the oxygen in a very, very slow way. So this way of aging tawnies is also going to give you different kinds of profiles. Okay, the size of the barrel, the age of the barrel. We never use new oak, never ever. Like you do that in Jerez, but in Porto wine you never use new oak. So you are going to you need to preserve all the barrels that you have in the best way to make sure that you can keep using them to age your wines. Okay.
Are there specific kinds of barrels? Again, we're talking regulations. Are there specific kinds of barrels that must be used in the production of port, or can it be different types of wood?
Well, different types of wood, and the most of the barrels that we have were made like 50 or 80 years ago, and the wood that you would use would be like wood that you could have in Portugal, like Portuguese oak, chestnut, something like that you could have around you. Right now, because like especially for companies that also produce like still wines and have new oak that they use to age your still wines, after some years you can start to prepare them to be used with ports. But for that you need like 10, 15 years using different kinds of port wines. Make sure that you are preparing these barrels for when they really age ports. So it's like a long way also.
So it's interesting also, besides the heavily regulated there's dozens of grapes that you can choose to make port, which adds to the additional complexity, although there are some more common ones. Curious, with a tawny versus a ruby versus a white port, are there certain varieties that lend themselves better to different styles?
Well, like legally we can use 111 different varieties of grapes. All of them are Portuguese, and most of them are indigenous from Douro Valley. So Portugal is one of the countries that have more different varieties of grapes, indigenous ones. So
I will say that just put Chateauneuf-du-Pape to shame, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And most of them we can't pronounce. So
it's true. One of the challenges is that. So I hope that like in 10 years, most of the people know some of them. Well, Touriga Nacional is already a grape that most of people know. It's like a red grape. It was also legalized in Bordeaux in the in I think 2020 perhaps. So right now they can plant Touriga Nacional and produce a Bordeaux with this grape. So Touriga Nacional is one of the most known, and this is a grape that has plenty of flavors, color, good acidity. So normally it's the kind of grape that you are going to use to produce like a vintage, an LBV, more the ruby style. So you have Touriga Franca also used more for that kind of style. But then if you want to produce a town, like the color, it's not so important in the beginning. What you need is like good acidity, good structure. That is also required to produce a good ruby, of course. But if you have a wine that have all these things, but the color, it's not so present, perhaps you are going to use it to age as a tonic, okay? Because the color is one of the things that it's required by the institute to produce a ruby, okay? So, and if you take like an LBV and a 10 years old, if you look to the color, they are completely different. The flavors are completely different, and sometimes people say, "Oh, normally I taste a wine and everything tastes the same. I don't distinguish the flavors." Or I think when you start to taste port wines, you are going to discover that finally it's quite easy to distinguish them by the color, by the flavor, and it's something that after some time it's quite easy to distinguish them, and especially by the flavor. So it's very, very important to make sure that they have all these different color styles. So in the whites, we also have around 40 something different varieties. So one of the most known is Viuzinho, or Malvasia Fina, or Rinto, or Rabigato. These are grapes that give you different kinds of things. Some of them are more for the body, others more for the flavor, others more for the acidity. And the acidity is something that we are always looking for in Douro Valley. So have different altitudes, different expositions to the sun, different varieties of grapes. And these help us to produce perhaps one of the most iconic and special wines in the world. And diversity here is it's the key, always the key.
It is key because a lot of people who may not be less familiar with port it's like the blind men and the elephant. They only know ruby. Okay.
Yeah.
And they haven't had a tawny, and they haven't had they haven't had a white. My first white ports were with you at Gramercy Tavern, and I was enchanted by them. They also make a terrific port cocktail. White port and tonic, or for me, soda and some orange and lime is just ethereal for an aperitivo. We had one with you at lunch, and it's something everybody should try. And now there's rosé ports also, which is a newer development. Let's talk about, and we have a photo. I think I'm going to ask our wonderful engineer Juan to put the photo of the bottles up just so people can kind of see a range. Let's talk about some of the signature ports that you make, a few. And also we need to define colheita, which is an important term in others, because that's where it gets confusing, the aging, what makes a vintage port, which, so let's take us through it.
Okay, so we can have 3 different styles of wine that have the year of the harvest, okay? Mm-hmm. And 2 of them are ruby, and 2 of them are colheitas. So the vintage, what we call vintage port, it's a style of porter. It's bottled very, very young. And in the Kopke, it's the only style that we bottle to age in the bottle. Okay, so 2 years after the harvest, we send a sample to the institute, and we say, well, we want to bottle this wine as a vintage. They are going to do all the chemical analysis. They are going to taste it, blind tasting always. And in the end, if this wine has at least 9 points in 10, you can bottle it as a vintage. Okay, that's the only requirement that you need to bottle a vintage, is to make sure that you have quality enough to do it. Okay, so 2 years after you are going to bottle your wine, you can sell it right now, or you can keep it in your cellars and sell it later. Okay, so this is the only part that we produce to age in the bottle. And then we have what we call the ladle bottle vintage, that it's also a wine from one single year. And this wine is bottled between the 4th and the 6th year after the harvest. And it has the same profile as a vintage, because it's a ruby style. Okay, it's also quite dense. It has all the fruitiness. It has the acidity, but it doesn't have the same aging potential to age in the bottle. So you are going to keep it 2 years more, and you are going to bottle it for people that really enjoy a good, fruity, intense ruby style. Okay, so this is an LBV, and it always have to have the year of the harvest. And then we have two kind of collators. What is a collator? A collator is also a wine from one single year, but it's not going to be a ruby style. So we are not going to bottle it quite fresh with no kind of oxidation, so very fruity. No, in the collator style, legally, we have to keep them 7 years in barrels, and after that, you can start to bottle it and sell it. In our case, in Kopke, we only start to bottle it 10 years after the harvest. So every year we release 2 new collators. This year we are going to bottle for the first time 2016, tawny and white, always. Okay, so next year it's going to 17 and then the 18. Okay, so this is the kind of wine that stayed 10 years in a barrel, and it's the wine that after the harvest that we choose to put in a barrel and stay there until it ends. So we start to bottle it 10 years after, but we only bottle the quantity that our clients demand. So that means that you can have like a 2016 bottle this year, and I hope that you can taste like a 2016 bottle in 20 years. Okay, the big difference between these two wines is that the one that we are going to bottle in 20 years stayed 20 years more in the barrel. Okay, so this is the kind of wine that it's always going to be different every time that we bottle it, even if the bottling is in the same year, because the difference between from the first bottling to the one that we are buying is the time that stayed in the barrel. And we always put the year of the bottling in the back label, so you always know, you can see how many years it's stayed in barrel. So these are the types of port that have the year of the harvest. And then we have all the other ones are blends. So that means that all the other ones are made to make sure to go for a profile. Okay, so like every time that we have like a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and right now with the 80 years old, it's the kind of wine that we produce every year, making sure that this new wine that we are producing is very, very similar to the last one. Okay, so for that, we don't do it like in Jerez, that they have the Solera system. No, this is like we have many different wines aging in different cellars, some of them near the river, others upper. So with different conditions, in different kinds of woods, in different size, to make sure that we have different profiles of wine to construct this blend. Okay, so you can look for like a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or 80 years old as an infinite wine. Okay, because our work is to make sure that we are always aging wines to reproduce this profile. Okay, so the 10 years old and 10, 20, 30, and 40 are profiles that were established by a different generation of professionals. And in our time, we could work in the 50 and the 80. So it's like an honor to create a profile for such an old house. So it's like it's an amazing thing.
We have a Kopke Collective 2005. Are we sure? Drinking it? And what's the other one? And then we have
a white Coletta 2005.
Yeah.
And
2005. So you have the tawny and white.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have the tawny and the white, and they were both bottled in 2024. And that's really a key point, is that the vintage date of the Coletta is 2005, but the bottling date is 2024. So it's a 19-year-old it's a 19-year-old tawny.
So that's a very important.
So that's very
issue.
interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the things, this is it, and this is very, very important. So in our case, we only bottle, we bottle as our clients require. Okay, so that means that we'll keep having these collators until the day that it's going to finish. Okay, and since the first bottling until the end, it's going to be a different one. It's always changing. And we are known for that. So Kopke is perhaps the house that has more different years of Colheita. The oldest one that we still keep in our barrels is a 1934, a tawny. And then we have the 35, white and tawny. And this white is quite dry. It's a different style. We have the 37, we have the 38, we have the 40, 41, and then we go for the 50, 51, 52, 54. Some of them we only have like very small amounts, and sometimes we only release it in special years. But others we still keep very, very good amounts, and we can and we have like this plan of bottling the quantities that we can bottle each year for each. The truth is that every time that someone tastes one of these wines, are tasting a little bit of history. So many generations of people working these wines, and well, the truth is that our job right now is only to make sure that they are well taken care, and at the same time we are producing wines for the next generations to work. So this is always like a work in progress. It's not, and anything is finished, you know, like, well, you produce a wine, you bottle it, and it's done. No, here it's a completely different system, and the truth is that you are a little bit, you are a small part of the whole process.
I'm curious if we were touring, I think it was Graham's, and they had these historic vintage years. It was like a museum of vintage years with the bottle and the story. When it is a vintage year, is it a vintage year for all the producers and port producers, or just a specific producer? How does that work?
Well, vintage port in the old days, vintage, well, even in nowadays, but a big difference is that right now you control better your viticulture. Okay, you control better the climatic change. You know, you can predict like storms or a whole everything, so you can react before, you can prevent some damage, and you can and the truth is that in nowadays every year you produce a good quality grape quality to produce like a vintage port. But in the older days it was much difficult. So normally, a vintage port is produced when you really have good grapes. Like you have good grapes, you are going to vinify them in a proper way, and the result is like a great wine that has full of acidity, color, potential of aging, everything. So these wines normally, especially in the old times, when you could have like a vintage year, it was like a great celebration. We still do it, but as I told before, the only thing that you need to bottle a wine as a vintage is to have the permission of the Institute of Port Wine. Okay, so you have to send them the sample. They are going to taste it and say, okay, you have 9 points or 10 points, so you can bottle it as a vintage. After that, the company bottled their wine and they are going to release it. But when most of the companies can have this authorization of the institute, when the institute say that more than 50% or more than 60% of the companies have all the requirements to bottle a vintage, then the Brotherhood of Port Wine declares it as a classic year for the vintage, okay? And then we have like a big celebration of that.
Okay. That's when the party happens.
Yes, that's an amazing. Well, of course, bottling a vintage, it's always a celebration, okay? But when most of the companies can do it, that says that was a really good year. So for the Brotherhood, it's like a classic year for a vintage, okay? But if you have quality enough, you can bottle every year. If you
Right.
And it does show that houses do have different harvests and different vintages that they create. So some may decide to declare a vintage, even though it's not a classic vintage, because they think theirs is good enough to be a vintage and put on the market.
Yes.
Whereas maybe another one down the road might not do that.
Right, exactly. Which is why I asked the question.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to learn. Here's what I learned. I learned is we have to come back and learn more because, like with all wine, and we've interviewed a lot of people who've been in wine for much longer than the 30-something years that we have. It's a constant learning process, which is why we love it so much. A couple of things before we do need to wrap. We visited at the Lodge. The Lodge is what they call the places of Villanova, the places where you can visit. And they're all quite beautiful. And they're all practically on top of each other, too. It's like Lodge City across the Douro River. At Kopke, you have a stunning hotel and spa and a restaurant.
It just opened.
And it's filled with incredible art, modern art, contemporary art, just incredible. What else can you tell us about the visitor experience to let our followers know that they're welcome to visit?
Yes. So right now, Kopke Group has two different hotels. So we have this Kopke Tivoli partnership in Vila Nova de Gaia that was constructed in the old cellars of Kopke. And we still maintain a part of our wines aging there. So if you stay in this hotel, you can visit the cellars. You can, I think, our goal is to make sure that everybody that stays in this hotel can have a full experience of Kopke wine. Of course, it depends if you want to or not. But the truth is that if you really love port wine, if you like wine in general, I think this is a very special place to stay. I think, the hotel has 150 different rooms. You have a spa, a swimming pool, beautiful gardens, and the art that you can see there. It's like a collection of Mr. Kopke, so he's the owner of this collection, and it's something that is worth to see. So this is a place where I think you can have like the best experience: food, wine, views, place, and especially if you are curious to know a little bit more about port.
Right.
We also have like a guest house, a small guest house in our state in São Luís. It only has 11 rooms. It's like near the river. It also have a swimming pool. And if you are more for nature and to walk around all the vineyards, the 90 hectares that we have there, I think it's also a good choice.
The Quintas are in the Douro Valley. They're different experiences. They really are.
Really different. So there, and even the people are different. Okay, so in Douro, it's all about like the soil, the
Yeah.
vineyards.
It's farm.
You construct that, you know,
Mhm.
like,
Yes.
and you have to have a knowledge to do that, and you have to always be present every day, because every day you are facing different challenge.
Right.
Here in Gaia, well, time is one of the best allies that you can have to a report. Okay, so it's a different. You have different times and different ways of being in the field, and even these places, I think you can feel that. Okay?
And it's very easy just to bring it full circle. Villanova de Gaia is literally across the river. You can get there by car. They have cable cars. There's lots of ways to get there. Ferries, you name it. We drove. But we have loved speaking with you. We need to wrap, but we've been talking with Carla Tiago, who's a longtime winemaker at Kopke, the oldest porthouse at 1638. In fact, the website is Kopke, Kopke, 1638.com, where you can learn about the history, you can learn about visiting, you can learn about the different styles of port. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Everybody should get out there and expand their palate and try the different styles.
Absolutely.
Many just only are familiar with Ruby, but I've always been a tawny girl, but now I'm like totally white also. I mean, the Asian whites are incredible. So, I'm there. So thank you, Carla. As always, it's a pleasure to see you. We hope to come back to Porto and spend more time. We love Portugal, so definitely.
Thank you for having me. I'm expecting you, so please, anytime. We'll always love to receive people that really enjoy wine, especially ports. And this is always a very, very special wine that most of the people don't know and need to discover. So, and we are here for that. So, if you want, please come and visit us.
Absolutely.
We'd love to receive you.
Absolutely. And really, it is about expanding your palate. And the best way to do it is to visit where the wines or the foods are made and to meet the people. It makes a big difference. You've been listening to The Connected Table Live with Melanie Young and David Ransom. You can follow us at The Connected Table on Instagram. Subscribe to our Substack, The Connected Table. Check us out on theconnectedtable.com, and always listen to all our shows anywhere, anytime on over 65 podcast channels, and of course, The Connected Table TV and Talk 4 Media. Thank you for joining us. Always stay insatiably curious.